Okay, we're recording this conference call so we can play it back later so people can listen in. My name's Tony Urso. I've been working across the United States on Common Core, probably 30 states, something like that, in some capacity, especially in New York. I've also been working with Duke Pesta, and I've talked to Erin Tuttle several different times. Tonight we're going to be talking about Common Core and the Catholic Church. Somewhat of a different topic, but a lot of similarities to what else is going on out there. I'd like to first go around and let everybody introduce themselves. First, let's start with Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne Gasparino from New York, founder of Stop Common Core New York State and Stop Common Core in New York Catholic Schools, and just working to inform, equip, and empower the parents of New York State and honestly nationwide to get this stopped in our schools.
And then next, what about Erin?
Hi, my name is Erin Tuttle. I am from Indianapolis, Indiana. I co-founded Hoosiers Against Common Core with Heather Crossan, and we have been active in the legislation which paused the Common Core in Indiana. I'm a member of the PAE network, and I'm excited to be here with all of you tonight.
And then Dr. Pesta.
Hi, I'm Duke Pesta. I'm a university professor, English professor, for about the last 20 years, and I am the academic director of an online homeschool, Freedom Project Education. And along with Tony, we have been sort of warriors in Wisconsin, like you have all been in your states, trying to fight back Common Core. And I've done a lot of work in particular in Wisconsin with the Catholic bishops here. Wisconsin's one of those states where the Catholic schools have almost across the board blindly and happily accepted Common Core without being asked. So we've been fighting that front here as well.
Excellent. What I'd like to do is we're going to start out and let Dr. Pesta stretch out for a while here, give us kind of a lecture because he's a professor and that's what professors are supposed to do. And then we'll let Erin speak for a while, ask a few questions, and then Yvonne will take over the call with some of the questions that were thrown out there from the members. So why don't you go ahead, Duke?
Sure, and obviously it's difficult to tell what kind of range of people we have out there, how many people are out there, and what everybody knows. As Yvonne and I discussed, I thought it might be wise to take just a minute or two and give a basic overview of Common Core, given that we may have some people who know nothing about it or know very little. And so Common Core, of course, is a national set of curriculum standards that has pretty much been written in secrecy. Two small trade organizations, I call them lobbyist groups because that's really what they are. The NGA, National Governors Association, and the CCSSO took big money from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to craft these standards. People say they're not a national curriculum, they're not a national set of standards, but that's just a bold-faced lie. Even before the standards were written in private, they were the Obama administration rolled out the so-called Race to the Top program, where they offered states billions of dollars in taxpayer money back in 2009, 2010. And this money was offered to states with struggling budgets, education budgets, and the only proviso put on, well, there were two provisos. The main proviso put on taking the money was simply that if you took the money, you had to take Common Core when the standards were finally written and eventually rolled out. So that's how 45, 46 states got on the hook for Common Core. Nobody had seen them. Nobody voted on them. Very few teachers had any input in the crafting of them. The people who wrote them, these two lobbyist groups, they're not accountable to Congress. They're not accountable to the Department of Education. They're certainly not accountable to the states. And so we have this disgusting situation where our American public schools now, the curriculum guidelines that by all, in all effects and purposes now, that dictate what's going to be taught and how it's going to be taught in our schools, at least as far as the math and English standards. Those are the two standards that have been rolled out and largely incorporated so far, with more to follow. That these standards are not the property of the American people. They're not the property of moms and dads. They're not the property of the states. They're not even the property, really, of Congress. They are the property of this copyrighted group, small group of activists with lots and lots of liberal dollars behind them. And so by simply bribing the states, I know I was in New York a week and a half ago, and New York received $700 million from the federal government 3-4 years ago with no strings attached other than When Common Core standards are written, they're your standards. And so you see the very top-down and imperious way these were imposed on the states. And what a burden. You've got states now that the standards have been seen and we understand them, now that we've begun to see the horrific consequences of the standards in action, the goofy teaching methods, the watering down of education, the substitution of classic literature and foundation-building literature with tendentious informational text, all of it from a pretty dramatically liberal perspective, the appropriation, the use of certain books, particularly in the English course, that are age-inappropriate, graphic, sexually graphic, disturbingly inappropriate. And as we begin to see more and more evidence of this, people have begun to fight back. And consequently, we're up to somewhere in the vicinity of 20 states that are either partially trying to stop and halt the standards, or beginning the process of discussing it, or that have just pulled out altogether. And not surprisingly, people will tell you it's not a federal curriculum, but you bribe them going in, you give all this money to the states to take it, sight unseen, and now those states that are trying to back out of it are being blackmailed on the way out, threatened. Like states like Georgia, who have decided to get rid of it or try to get rid of it, are now being told by the federal government, if you do that, we're going to pull back tens of millions of dollars from your federal education budget, putting the states and the schools in a very difficult position because that money's already been spent, it's been allocated, and if they give it back, panic sets in. So that's sort of where we are nationally. And in terms of our Catholic schools, one of the most absolutely baffling aspects of this makes me madder than I expect the Department of Education, I expect the federal government, I certainly expect the Obama administration to do everything they can to hijack education, nationalize it. That's what they've done with everything else. So I'm not surprised by it. But when our Catholic schools, sight unseen and without being asked to, rush to the front of the line, so many of them have, rushed to the front of the line to take this curriculum, to take these standards, it is absolutely shocking. And what it basically is, it's an absolute abnegation of our faith responsibilities. It's a bizarre world in which our Catholic administrators, those secular Catholics by and large, who administer education for the bishops, and that's the thing I should preface by saying, we've talked to quite a few bishops, and almost none of them had any idea what Common Core was until we talked to them. Almost none of the dioceses in which Common Core is moving and already implemented, in almost none of them, as far as I can tell, did the bishops have any real sense of what Common Core was. The secular administrators who put it in, oftentimes without even consulting the bishops that they did so, they put their faith not in the church, not in theology, not in the mission of Christian Catholic education. They've put their faith in the federal government. They have solicited, they've run to the federal system, they've all but begged the masterminds behind this to allow them to use the Common Core curriculum. I don't know if you're aware of it, but just today, the Cardinal Newman Society released a report that demonstrates that the National Catholic Education Association, the NCEA, this is the group that almost every single Common Core Catholic school cites as a reason why we should do this. Well, the NCEA is for this. The National Catholic Education Association says this is wonderful. We need to follow them. If the National Catholic Education Association says it's so good, then it's good enough for us. Well, we find out today that they received a huge six-figure grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, you think about this for a second. Bill and Melinda Gates, with their foundation, they fund radical birth control and abortion policies all across the third world. They sponsor and promote with that money all sorts of anti-Catholic and anti-Christian initiatives designed to undermine faith, undermine the church, weaken the control of Christian values across the country and the world. They want to see with their money, they want to try to align America with the UN in terms of ceding sovereignty, both over our kids with things like Common Core, and certainly over our borders. The entire premise of the Bill and Melinda Gates Charitable Foundation and Trust is to unmake traditional values. And so this organization, who everybody points to, this National Catholic Education Association, received a six-figure grant to promote the implementation of Common Core. And what's most shocking about it is they applied for it. The Gates didn't seek them out. They put together a proposal and solicited Bill and Melinda Gates for money to implement Common Core in our Catholic schools. That's what I mean. Our administrators, those people who are supposed to be watching out for our Catholic kids, they have sold their soul. They have put their faith in not just men, but in men whose openly stated intent is the defamation of Catholic traditional values. And so this is where we sit. I tell you, like I said, we fully expect this government in particular, but secular government in general, to do everything it can to undermine traditional Christian values. But when you've got the people most responsible for Catholic education doing it, it's frustrating. And I will say this, in the talks we've had, and we went and had a conversation with a priest a few months ago, and in the conversations I've had with the bishops, they are as puzzled by Common Core as most of the rest of the country is. The vast majority of Americans, in every recent poll, they don't even know what the word means. They've never heard of it. So it's a very small percentage of people who have any idea what Common Core is. I gave a talk this afternoon here in Wisconsin about 50 or 60 women, Women's Republican Club, and these were highly educated, highly political, highly informed women. And before I began the speech, I asked them, how many of you still don't quite know what Common Core was? And about 90% of them raised their hand. And if these women, who have been actively engaged for years, they don't know what Common Core is, you know the vast majority of the rest of the country doesn't know. And that means our bishops don't know, and that means our priests don't know. And the problem with the priests is we've done our best whenever possible to get in front of priests and tell them. And they're suitably alarmed. Every priest I've spoken to. When we were in Albany, up in Yvonne's stomping ground, sort of, in New York State, a couple weeks ago, week and a half ago, gave a talk to about 1,000 New Yorkers about this topic. And we had one priest there, Father Mack, and he came up to me afterward. He was mortified. He'd never had any idea about this. The thing about the priests is, and a lot of people will say, well, why don't we get the priests motivated? Why don't we get them involved in this? And the problem is that the priests, due to their vow of obedience to the church, they're not really allowed to advocate one way or the other for it. So a lot of the priests we've talked to, they get it. Once you show them the presentation, once you explain a few of these things, they get it. The problem is that they can't say or do much until their bishops make a statement on this. And so if we're going to win this in any way, or if we're going to make a dent in this, we've really got to get around the bishops. We've got to get the bishops informed. The problem with most bishops, as you know, is they're extremely busy. They're doing all sorts of pastoral care. They're having national bishops. They're doing really important work. And they're putting their faith in the people who run education for them. A classic example is our bishop here in Green Bay. The people running the secular people running his education, his Catholic schools, has been in place long before he got here. So when he got here a couple of years back and went to work doing all the things he had to do, he just trusted that the people who'd been in those positions for a long time were going to do the right thing. And so when we brought to his attention Common Core and what it stood for, he's duly mortified. And he's actually becoming a bit of an advocate, I think, against Common Core. He hasn't made a formal public statement yet. It's only been a couple of months, three and a half months now that we've apprised him of this. We've written documents for him. We've provided him with information. He's doing his homework. And we fully expect that sometime in the near future he will move to have Common Core removed from his diocese. And it was simply a matter of getting him to understand what the circumstances were, and that's the hard part, getting the bishops to recognize this, because they're the ones who have to move. And once our bishop here in Green Bay, once he makes a definitive statement, a public statement, that's when you can then go to the priests. That's when we can organize and get the priests behind this as well. But that's what has to happen. And so that's kind of where we are with it. And the dangers, in a nutshell, of Common Core, I had to put my finger on one thing that's dangerous about it. It is the idea that it doesn't believe in truth. You can see from the get-go that every aspect of Common Core is predicated around the idea that there is no such thing as truth generally, and there is no such thing as absolute truth. And it's morally relative, it's postmodern, it's materialist, atheist, Marxist, it's everything you expect from secular government, and particularly this government. The fundamental principles of Common Core, as bad as the standards are, and all this, I know a lot of you have seen the goofy way that they do math, the counterintuitive way they do math, You've heard about the informational texts that are replacing classic literature. You've heard about the anti-American assignments, promoting communism, undermining the relationship between parents and children, advocating that the state is the family, the only family that matters. All that's frustrating. But at the core of it is a fundamental denial of any sort of truth. We see it in the Common Core math. I know you've all heard this, right? All these exercises, all these talking head supporters of Common Core saying things like, well, right answers don't matter as much as how you get them. And we're less concerned about kids in math class getting right answers than we are them having a dialogue about math. One of the most alarming aspects of Common Core math is the so-called pair and share alliance, where teachers become not really teachers. They don't teach math anymore. What they do is they put kids in little groups, pairs, and they ask them to collectively, that's a dangerous word, as we know, to collectively come up with the right answer in math. And so what happens is you get groups of 2 and 3 kids, and the right answer is not as important as them all agreeing on what the answer is. So it's an exercise, first and foremost, not in the truth of math, not in the basic premise of math. And let's not forget, a wise man once said that mathematics is the language of God, that if there's one universal language that everyone can speak, and actually a language, when you think about how God made the universe, a language that is the basic building block of the universe. What is physics? What is physics, the study of the universe? It is simply math. It is numbers. It is trying to understand numerically how the universe hangs together. So God made the universe in a way that is mathematically understandable to a certain degree. So our wise persons who said math is the language of God, it is the universal truth. 2 plus 2 is 4, no matter who you are, no matter what your culture, your ethnicity, your race, your gender. It doesn't matter when you live or didn't live. It doesn't matter what your era, the era in which you were born. Math is a universal language. It is true. But in our Common Core now, there is no truth in math. Consensus replaces truth. And you can sort of see, without me having to belabor the point, you can certainly sort of see the Marxist socialist origins of this. Right, virtue, Christian living, academic achievement for academic achievement's sake, all this stuff is secondary. It doesn't matter anymore. Even basic things like math and numbers. They're debatable. We've had a number of episodes all over the country have called us, shown us assignments. One classic case was from New York, somebody in New York. A mother in New York called us, and she was frustrated because her 8-year-old had an assignment where he was paired with 2 other kids, and it was a simple multiplication question, something like 6 times 7 equals 42, and he put 42. But the other 2 kids in his group didn't think it was 42. And so a big convocation ensued between the 3 of them. They thought they were right. He thought he was right. And at the end of the day, he was marked wrong, even though he had the right answer. And they were marked right, even though they had the wrong answer, because they had come to consensus between the 2 of them, and he refused to come to consensus with the other 2. And so the right answer didn't matter. He was marked wrong. The 2 who collectively got the wrong answer, they were rewarded for their collectivism. And this is the idea behind it. And you think about this, too. We've gotten a glimpse of the coming science standards. We've gotten a glimpse of the National Sexuality Core Content Standards, which may or may not be implemented. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen in 3 years, but they're written. And we see in the sexuality standards how utterly arbitrary gender is. If 2 plus 2 doesn't necessarily equal 4, then you can see how this impacts the rest of the curriculum. If numbers aren't true, well, then what's gender? Gender is just a made-up thing. There are no boys, there are no girls. It's all just constructionism. You are what you say you are. You are what you want to be. We all know that a couple weeks ago in California became the first state in the union, dubiously, to pass a law that Jerry Brown signed that says from kindergarten, any kid in public schools, from kindergarten through high school, any kid who just thinks they're the opposite gender, they're a boy trapped in a girl's body or vice versa, is legally mandated now to use the opposite sex restroom. So if you're a little boy who thinks he's a girl, you have to be allowed to use the woman's restroom. Also, you have to be allowed, if you're a 13-year-old boy who thinks he's a girl, you are legally obligated now to be able to play sports for the girls' team. So imagine this, right? You got a 13-year-old boy who's just gone through puberty. He's growing, he's strong, he's physically active. Now, if he just simply says, I think I'm a girl, he has to be allowed onto the women's volleyball team or the women's basketball team. And you can see, right, if math means nothing, then what the heck is gender? And you see all across the board. You see it in the literature courses, the English courses that we have, English language arts. The standards here used to be reading great literature, and all the great literature that you read in English class used to be about morality and virtue, right? Bringing kids up in a virtuous way. And now, Common Core mandates that 60% of the literature you read in English class is removed and replaced with informational text, all of which is social engineering, it's Marxist. You have that among the Common Core exemplar texts are what? Barack Obama essay in a magazine about why single-payer health care is the only way to go, Environmental Protection Agency pamphlets that argue that human beings are systematically destroying the universe, that we're a plague on the earth, on and on and on. There's no intellectual or political balance in these articles in this informational reading. It's all leftist. A long essay about how grocery bags, whether paper or plastic, are destroying the planet. There's nothing that suggests opposite. Think about what this means for Roman Catholics or people who believe in God generally. If there is no such thing as absolute truth, if that's the foundation of this curriculum from top to bottom and across the subjects, then by definition this curriculum, its first major target is God himself. And once you destabilize God this way philosophically, once you create lesson plan after lesson plan, now, we've had a great example from a second grade classroom in Wisconsin, in which, I believe it was Wisconsin, in which our assignment was all about teaching kids. This is what they're doing in first and second grade now. Actually, no, I take it back. It wasn't Wisconsin. It was Illinois. Wisconsin has suspended the standards. We've got math and English, but we're not taking any others right now. Illinois is one of the first states, Common Core states, to actually already have adopted the new coming science standards. And so in kindergarten and first grade, they're doing things, they're having little weather assignments. They become little meteorologists. And this is not about teaching kids what weather is at that young age, 5 and 6. It's about convincing kids that human beings are destructive, that global warming is real, that there's no other way of looking at this. And so we saw the actual assignments in Illinois. The teacher's checklist from Illinois, it had a list of things for the teacher to be aware of. Be aware of the following myths and lies that might come up in your classroom when you talk about global warming. One of them was, quote, that somehow a divine being is responsible for weather and for the planet. That is a myth you have to unmake. So the entire premise of this educational assignment for 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds was to absolutely squash completely the notion that weather or climate or the universe was somehow in the hands of a superior being, a compassionate, conscious, loving human being. That was listed as a dangerous myth that had to be squashed for these kids. And so, and we're going to see more and more of these types of assignments moving forward across the board. Very powerful, very frightening. So I think that's it. And when you think about how the way the curriculum is set up and what their and you look at the people behind it, by the way. Don't just look at Bill and Melinda Gates, and we've seen the horrible things that they stand for. How about Arne Duncan? How about Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education? I don't know if you're familiar with Arne Duncan, but Arne Duncan, well before he became the Secretary of Education, the number one guy for education in the country, he was a teacher, a principal. When he was a principal, Arne Duncan, he was approached by a young boy in his school, underage, 13-year-old boy, I believe it was, who very shook up, came to his office and said, Principal Duncan, I've been sexually assaulted. I've been sexually assaulted by an adult male. Arne Duncan's response to this kid was, well, you should just relax and try to enjoy it. You should be flattered that an older man finds you sexually attractive. This is the man. who is now our Secretary of Education. When you think about the people behind Common Core, the idea that our secular Roman Catholic administration have gone to people like this, have sought money from them, have gone out of their way to leap to the front of the line to take this curriculum sight unseen, it is absolutely staggering. And when you also consider the fact that groups like we mentioned, the NCESA, these watchdog groups who are supposed to have the best interest of our Catholic kids in mind, are going hat in hand to Bill and Melinda Gates for money to help them implement this anti-theistic, anti-Christian, amoral curriculum into our Catholic schools. Perhaps the greatest lie of all Common Core, besides that denial of all truth, perhaps the greatest lie out there about this is the lie that you hear from administrators, Catholic administrators all the time. We will take Common Core, but we will make it Christian. We will transform it. We'll keep what's good about it, and we'll make it Catholic. Man, is that unbelievably devious. So you're going to bring in a curriculum you admit isn't Catholic. You're going to forget the great 2,000-year tradition of Catholic education, Catholic character formation, the impartation of appreciation for the sacraments. You're going to get rid of all that. The education that gave us Aquinas, the education that gave us Cardinal Newman, the education that gave us Dante. You're going to get rid of all that. And you're going to replace it with a curriculum you concede isn't Catholic. And then you're going to tell everybody that, oh, don't worry, we'll take this flawed curriculum and we'll make it Christian. We'll make it Catholic. Well, as I've said to some of these administrators I've confronted, that's just ridiculous. Many of your teachers aren't Catholic to begin with. Your teachers aren't sociologists. They're not anthropologists. What makes you think in these English and math courses they're going to have time to unmake the damage done? It's a hyperbolic metaphor, I know. But I told the Bishop of Madison when I was sitting in his living room, I simply told him that this argument is like inviting the devil into your living room and then telling everybody not to worry about it because you got him on a leash. Inviting a curriculum you know is counter to all Christian values, and then pretending you're going to ask our teachers with 4-year undergraduate degrees, basically, that's what most teachers have, as somebody who watches over and sees what education majors are like when they graduate, with all due respect, our graduating teachers over the last few years don't know much of anything. And many of them aren't Catholic. And you put them in the Catholic schools, and you're going to expect these teachers to find a way to counterbalance all of this atheism and materialism and Marxism with what? But that's the bill of goods we've been asked to swallow. These are some of the major problems that we face. And again, I emphasize that in my experience, just like most politicians I've talked to, and boy, Tony can back me up on this, we've talked to a lot of politicians, and the vast majority of them don't have the vaguest idea what Common Core is. As a matter of fact, at the talk I gave today in Wisconsin, we had a politician from the north of the state who came, and we've already had 4 state hearings in Wisconsin on Common Core, 4 of them. This has blown up over the last 6 months. And this state representative from the north of Wisconsin, who happened to be at my talk, he said to me, quote, afterwards, "This is the very first time I've ever heard of Common Core." His legislature has been debating it. A select committee of Democrats and Republicans have had 4 public hearings, and he'd never heard anything about it until today. So even those committee members in Wisconsin, Democrats and Republicans, a small minority who are hearing the hearings, the vast majority of the rest of the legislature doesn't even know what's going on here. And you think about the insidiousness of this. This is a curriculum, go back to where I started, that was never vetted. It's never been formally benchmarked. Nobody knows it's going to work. Here, how about this quote? How about this quote from Bill Gates in last month's Washington Post? 1 month ago, Bill Gates said, and I quote, "It would be nice if we knew if our education stuff was going to work, but we probably won't know that for 10 years, unquote. It may be 10 years before we have the vaguest notion whether our educational scheme works. This is shocking.
Now,
and the way it became, yes.
I wanted to drill down a little bit on a couple things here.
Sure, go ahead.
Before we jump over to Erin, because I know she's been patiently waiting too. But
absolutely.
One, you hear this 15% thing. 85% of it, supposedly this is going to be the same thing for everybody all across the United States except for the last 15%. You can add or subtract. Does it say anything about in there, Catholic specific, about where religion classes are going to fit, et cetera?
Well, that's an interesting thing. When you mention that, Common Core, as I mentioned, Common Core is copyrighted at the federal level. It's copyrighted by the NGA, and the SCCSSO. It's copyrighted, and the copyright stipulates that nothing can be taken away from it. And so right now, the copyright, 85% of that curriculum, those standards are copyrighted, which means states have some freedom right now to be able to add up to 15% new content, but you can't get rid of the old. And I just ask your listeners to think this through. Do you honestly believe that in a few years, when Common Core is cemented across the country, do you honestly believe they're going to be able to allow states any wiggle room? Because if Wisconsin can do things 15%, 20% different than New York can do them, and if New York can do things 15% different than Indiana, then you don't have a standard. You can't test them nationally, right? And that's the thing. Just like when Obamacare was rolled out, and they promised you'll get to keep your doctor, you'll get to keep your plan. Now we know that's not true. But they had to tell you that to get you to swallow it. It's the same thing here. They're getting you some latitude, but it's a shell game. And here's the other thing that's so frustrating. There is no standards in Common Core that deal with Catholics. The Catholics have never been asked, even the federal government, who would love nothing more than to get rid of private schooling, to make every kid a government school kid. You have a federal government that Barack Obama said in Ireland this summer when talking to a group of Irish Catholic and Protestant kids, about 2,000 kids, some Protestants, some Catholics. Barack Obama said, as long as you Catholics have your schools and you Protestants have your schools, there will never be any unity. We must get beyond the notion of these schools and have one school system. The objective, the thing is, Tony, that there is the standards are, the federal government in their wildest dreams never dawned on them that the Catholic schools would be taking this. They weren't even worried about it. So there's no provisions whatsoever. The Catholic schools have taken them, right? And the interesting thing about it is, unlike the public schools, the Catholic schools took them voluntarily. So the Catholic schools could just as easily throw them out as they could take them back again. They could change them, I suppose, if they want to. But the problem is, they're not doing it. They're adopting Common Core almost right off the vine. And this argument that they're going to Christianize them, it's just incredibly bogus. It's impossible to do it.
So if I would back up a little bit, if I were a parent and I were looking at this and saying, if everybody's all the same, public schools, private schools, because that's what the program is, what's going to be the difference between public school and a Catholic school?
A big fat bill.
So you're saying
that's about it, right?
Yeah.
That in a religion class that you can get after school at some point.
Yeah,
so the
by
question
the way,
then becomes, why would the Catholic Church want to obsolete itself? There's a point where they can really come out in front and differentiate themselves.
Yes. Yeah, I've said to many bishops, I've said exactly that, Tony, that if the Catholic schools decided to go back to teaching traditional Catholic values and traditional Catholic subject matter, classical Catholic education, if the Catholic schools did that, you could, given how bad Common Core is going to be and how already, how many public school parents are fed up and want out of it, if the Catholic schools just went back to teaching a traditional Catholic, traditional classic Catholic education, if they did that, you could open a new Catholic school on every block in this country, and in a few years they'd be full. They would be full. But what's so perplexing is that the Catholic administrator's argument is to double down on stupidity. That which isn't work, let's just keep doing more of it. And so what you have here is what I started with, Tony. Our lay Catholic educators are much more worried about money and about standardized tests than they are about the health and well-being of our kids. And so how does that work? Well, what the problem is They, rather than put your faith in Catholic faith formation, worry about the souls and the spiritual welfare of our kids first, which is their charge and their mission. Like you point out, Tony, that's the only reason we have schools. Catholic schools have, and it's not just Common Core. Over the last 20, 30 years, Catholic schools have become public schools with just slightly better discipline, right? Slightly cleaner schools, slightly less drugs and anarchy, places where you go and there's almost no Catholic faith formation whatsoever. So these are problems that definitely precede Common Core, and they will be around even if we kill Common Core. But so this gradual creep to sectarianism, to secularism, has been going on for a long time. Common Core is just the final nail in the coffin. And so the problem again is that why would any mom and dad pay that kind of money and I made this argument to a Catholic mom today. I simply pointed out to her that if you give me a choice between putting my Catholic kids in a public school or in a Common Core Catholic school, I will put them in the Common Core public school, because we expect in public school a completely secular materialist education. But when you send kids to Catholic school, and particularly a Common Core Catholic school, the damage they do is infinitely worse than what your kids would get in the public schools. Because in the Catholic schools, this is the kind of Catholicism that's being modeled for them, a Catholic education that is really a secular one. And so in the public schools, kids may lose their faith. In the Catholic schools, kids' faith is systematically undermined. When they think they're getting a Catholic education, when they think because they go to a school with the name of St. Thomas or St. Mary's, they think they're getting a Catholic education, what so many of the Catholic kids come to assume is that the definition of Catholicism is atheistic, materialistic, pluralistic, right? It's this multicultural. So in other words, if you give me a choice between a public school Common Core education or a Catholic Common Core education, I'm putting them in the public schools, because there's still hope that you can take them to church and take them to CCD, and you can still try to instill Catholic values that balance out what they're being taught in the schools. But when you combine those two things, so-called Catholic education with the secular garbage of Common Core, you're destroying their faith forever.
I'd like to bring in Erin now. She's been waiting patiently for a while. Go ahead, Erin. Why don't you say a few things?
Okay. I just wanted to first address the idea about the 15%, adding on to the Common Core and the copyright issue that was brought up. If a state does add 15%, like Dr. Pesta said, you cannot change any of the standards of the Common Core. You cannot delete any of the standards of the Common Core. You may only add 15%. And he spoke about, if you do that, then you wouldn't be able to compare, the data on the assessments between the different states. But the assessments through PARCC and Smarter Balance will not test anything that's been added. So they will be able to have consistent data whether or not a state adds 15% to it, because the only thing that will be tested will be what the Common Core standards are, not what your state adds. So think about that. What incentives do schools and teachers, Catholic or public, have to go above and beyond and do that extra 15% when they know that it won't be on the test, which are the measures for their accountabilities, both for the school and for teacher evaluations. So this idea of adding 15% is semantics. It means nothing.
Well, and let's pull this into the Catholic education for religion classes. Is it envisioned that 85% is going to be tested with religion in mind?
No, because the Common Core standards are only for English and for math. Our religion classes are not Common Core aligned at this point because they aren't part of the Common Core standards. So that would not be relevant to religion classes.
And when they go to the science and social studies, in other words, what I'm trying to get at is that I doubt that the federal lobbyists and the federal program is going to touch anything with religion, that they're going to throw it underneath that 85%. In other words, there is no plan to accommodate religion.
No, there will be no plans to accommodate religion. If you look at the science standards that are written and you look at the social studies standards that are written, you will see that they are actually anti-religious in nature. If you look at the science standards, they teach evolution, they teach population control. Many of the science standards talk about things like what damage, have the humans, what damage has the human impact on Earth caused, and how can we stop it? How can we stop the per capita usage of our Earth's minerals and resources? Per capita means per person, to show that unless we implement some sort of population control, the evil human will use up all of Mother Earth's resources. So there's a lot of things woven into the science standards really in a very obvious way that are anti-religious in nature. Sorry. But, it was interesting about what he said earlier, and it's a question that I get the most often, is who is making the decisions for our Catholic schools to adopt the Common Core curriculum? And the second question I get most often is, who can stop this? And both of these are really the million-dollar questions, which should be easy to answer, right? I mean, you would think that you would be able to get an easy answer for that. But the line of command, it seems, has been blurred. And, Dr. Pesta commented that the bishops are aware of the inherent problems of the Common Core, and I would totally agree with this. But they must have made the decision that the schools will teach the curriculums that are fully aligned with the Common Core. And I say this because, they must have made the decisions which told the priests you must be in compliance with Common Core completely. Because if you think about it, historically, the priest of a parish is in control of his church and the parish school. They are the ultimate authority within that group. His only superior, would be his bishop. And so when you think about it, the principal, they serve at the pleasure of the priest. A priest doesn't answer to the superintendent of education, who is a layperson. He only answers to his bishop. And so there's something going on here where a priest, if he felt like he did not want the Common Core in his school, he is fully within his authoritative, position to say no, unless a bishop has told him, you must do this. There's no other person controlling what goes on in a parish besides the priest under the direction of his bishop. So I think some of those questions need to be answered for parents, because when in a world of school choice and we're making that choice to go there, we want to know what it is that we're choosing. And unfortunately, I think there's this issue within the accreditation of the Catholic schools. I was doing a little research today about Advance Ed. It's this global accreditation body, and it's really taking over all of the other accrediting agencies in the country. They're basically the parent company who controls everything for all of these regional accrediting agencies, of which many of the Catholic schools are accredited through. And it requires a lot of things that I won't go into. One of them is that a governing board is to be appointed within each school. It consists of different members of the community and parents and teachers and priests and different groups. But they basically are the ones who are going to be making the decisions over standards and assessments and all these other important decisions that govern our schools. So it's almost as if the accreditation process is sort of empowering the bureaucracy of the archdiocese, their offices of education, and maybe over the priest of a parish. I'm not sure, and I'm still doing research on this, but if that is the case, I think that's good, because that's where we can win this battle. Because unless canon law has changed, this is not an allowable power structure. So I think, I know there's a lot of Catholics on the line, and so I just kind of wanted to address that, because I think that is an issue that many of us are trying to get to the heart of. And I'm just, if anybody has any further information on that, I would love to hear about it.
Well, I would say, not to argue, but I would qualify what you said a little bit. We've talked to a lot of priests, and They are as in the dark about this as the bishops are. And what happens, it seems to me, in the school district, at least the ones in Wisconsin and some of the Midwestern states where we've been specifically, what happens is that the bishops all have people in charge of diocesan education. I don't know that I don't see a lot of evidence that the priests are the absolute authorities over what happens in those schools.
By canon law, they are. I mean,
by canon law, they might have that.
Every decision.
They might have that.
In law, that is the rule. Whether or not it's being blurred, that's a different. You know what I'm saying? That's a different question.
Right, and I agree with you.
The Office of Education is not in charge of what a priest says is acceptable and not acceptable to be teaching on Catholic education or general education. You know what I'm saying?
I think what has and that's true, but I think what has happened is that the bishops have, for the whole diocese, they have secular people in charge of the diocese education. I know in Wisconsin, it's true in Wisconsin here, that we have one man who's in charge of all the education. And I think what happens is that the priest, these are people usually appointed by bishops. And so the bishops have entrusted them with what the curriculum is going to be. And so the problem that you run into is, like you said, unless the bishops specifically say something, the Catholic priests have some freedom. But we are in a weird circumstance where the people the bishops have running education have gone ahead with this curriculum, which means, de facto, the bishops, without necessarily approving it, are seen to be approving it. So every bishop we've talked to in Wisconsin the 5 of them, did not know it was in their school system. Their education people put it there. The priests, on the other hand, assume, and I think this is what happens, the priests assume if the people the bishop have running education, if they've put this in, the priests are not in a position to contradict it then. And I see your point in terms of canon law, but in practicality, priests like bishops have all sorts of pastoral care duties, right? And so for them, if the bishop's people authorize it, then that for them is as good as the bishops authorizing it, which is what the bishops haven't done. And so if there's a place, from my perspective, where we can get at this, it's forcing the bishops to make an actual statement about what Catholic education is.
Right, but it's so difficult because, I hear from hundreds of parents all over the country, Catholic parents, who are saying, I've gone to my priest and we've all explained this to him and he's saying that there's nothing that he can do. That is not an answer because, the superintendent of education has told him this is the way it will be. A priest wouldn't say that there's nothing he can do, but there's nothing he can change because a layperson at the Office of Catholic Education has told him this is what they're doing. There's something else higher and more powerful than that has made some of the priests feel like they are somewhat hamstringed in changing the direction of curriculum at their schools. I find that surprising because when I grew up in Catholic schools, my entire life, and the priest was always the decision maker. He was always the judge and the jury of any decisions that were made in the schools, and I'm seeing that change. And so there's some questions that need to be answered about what is causing that. Is it because the bishops have said specifically this is what we're doing? And if that's the case, then that would answer the question. If they have not specifically said that, there has to be something else, either through accreditation, some other body, or some other power structure that has somewhat made priests feel like they can't make the decisions that they think are best for their schools and their students.
Well, I think some of that is over the last 20, 30 years, you've had what I talked about a little bit at the opening, this steady creep to align Catholic standards with national standards. This decision over the years to tie us more closely to the way that public school kids were tested, the almost exclusive hiring of teachers who were approved, accredited by big state education colleges. All of that has done it. But I think there's also something kind of basic here about this. I get what you're saying about the priests, but and I went to Catholic school too. The fact is as we know, the priests are responsible in their vow of obedience to on issues like this. They're responsible to the bishops. That whatever the bishop's position is on education in their diocese, the priests are not at liberty to contradict that. And I really do think, from the bishops I've talked to, that you're right. The bishops haven't made statements about this. The bishops haven't. I have yet to meet a bishop who's come out formally for Common Core, and yet their education people are. And you got to understand from the perspective of a diocesan priest, if the person the bishop has put in charge of education has put this in there, the assumption is it must be with the bishop's permission and consent. And there's where the gap is. That's the trouble we're having in Wisconsin, because the bishops are incredibly frustrated because the people they've entrusted with this mission of education haven't consulted them about it. And so when we talked to the Bishop of Green Bay, for instance, when we talked to him, he was absolutely blown away that this was in his school. And you've got the priests we've talked to. And the priests, when we talk to them, say, and everybody is on pins and needles here, waiting for the bishop to come out and make a statement.
Well, and there's on a positive note, which is always nice to get a positive note in the Common Core debacle. There was a conference held in New Jersey today, and I haven't been able to get in touch with the people I know who were there, but it was I'm spacing out on the name, the National Independent Catholic Schools, NAPSIS. Yes, has hosted this event, and I know that Monsignor Shadle from the parish that I'm involved with went to listen to what they were going to talk about. The superintendent of education from Indianapolis Archdiocese went. Bishops, I think there were some bishops there. I'm hoping they were supposed to be. I hope that they showed up. And superintendents of Catholic education from all over the country went. And I think that the speakers that they had on schedule were fantastic. I think that they are going to be, presenting the type of information that most people on this line would want these people to hear. And so I think this tide has kind of come in and is kind of shifting, as with all things that are kind of inherently evil. As they get exposed, those who are leaders and those who know right from wrong will eventually stand up and say no. So I think the tide is turning, at least for the Catholic schools, but there is a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of money, and there's a lot of people in high positions within this bureaucracy of the Office of Education within the Catholic schools that, like you said, is somewhat running education. And so these bishops and these people that are truly the power within the church, I think you're right. They are starting to get aware of what it is. Hopefully this conference will facilitate that process, and we can get some decent results out of it. So that's some good news.
Now, I'd like to jump in here for a second. That conference, actually there's a conference of bishops next week in Baltimore. This was set up specifically to get some momentum going into that bishop conference to make them aware. The good news is I know Dr. Stotsky was there, Emmett McGroarty was there, Chris Tankin was there, Dr. Tankin. These were all wonderfully strong opponents of Common Core, of which Stotsky actually sat on the Common Core Validation Committee. She has firsthand knowledge with a lot of this stuff. So I think that's positive.
And you know what? We have a video. There was a conference at Notre Dame in September where we had a bunch of different speakers come, and we have a video that is going to be done, I think, within the next day and available through the American Principles Project, who hosted it. And there are Sandra Stotsky. She actually gave 2 presentations during the day. And one of them I think everybody should see, and she talks about the process of the development of the Common Core. As a member of the Common Core Validation Committee, she was involved in the process from the beginning to the end, and she was charged with a group of people to validate whether or not, A, the Common Core was internationally benchmarked, and B, there was research to support the findings and the writing of the standards. And she said no. And the reason she said no is many, but when you look at who actually wrote the Common Core standards, which are supposed to tell us who is college and career ready, if you graduate and you fulfill the Common Core standards, you are college and career ready, which to me, those 2 things have completely different meanings behind them, and it would have completely different requirements to be career ready, meaning a high school diploma, and college ready to perform well in credit-bearing first-year courses in math and English. But there was not one a professor of English on the Common Core standards, nor were there any secondary English teachers, no high school English teachers on that writing team. I mean, how can a group of people decide what will make a student college ready to perform well in first, credit-bearing courses freshman year in English without those two groups? I mean, that's insane. And that is why the Common Core is the way it is. It did not involve the people who actually know what it means to be college ready.
Now, before we open it up to some of the questions that Yvonne has gotten from the members, I wanted to end on a high note here. I do think that there is enough movement across the United States on this issue that it's going to be coming, if it isn't in the forefront of some of these people's mind, it should be, because it's frankly out there. And as far as New York's going, I know Yvonne's really been making it happen there. And I really think New York specifically is going to be moving here in the next few months, maybe the first quarter of the year or so, of which that would force the Catholic schools in the area to at least rethink or relook at this whole thing.
Right.
The other thing I'd like to say is that Dr. Pesta is drafting or has drafted a paper that he'll be releasing maybe next week. Do you want to say something about that, Dr. Pesta?
Well, we one of the bishops in Wisconsin has actually asked us to write up a document that he could take to his fellow bishops that's heavily documented, that has lots of sources and that has lots of information, so that he can use it as a starting point to try to get the bishops all across the country to undo it, to take it out. Now, of course, out of respect for him and out of respect for what he needs to use it for in the short term, I'm not at liberty to really divulge it or to send it out until he has a chance to introduce it to his fellow bishops. But once that movement takes place, then there's no reason why we can't send it around more broadly. So I'd be happy to do that. The good news is that we actually now have bishops who are not only aware of the problem, but are actually gathering information to be able to do this correctly, to have their I's dotted and their T's crossed as they go to their fellow bishops and try to convince them, many of whom, again, don't know why this is a huge, huge problem.
So to sum this up then, with Dr. Pesta's paper, sometime in the next week, I'm not really sure, I want to be a little bit vague, but relatively soon, we're going to give that paper that he wrote specifically for the bishops, give it to Yvonne to put on the Stop Common Core Catholic New York site. You guys can then pick it up from there and hand it to your bishops, email it to them, etc., and get it in their hands.
And Tony, of course, we also have that document recently released by 130-something Catholic professors at various universities who've written a letter to, and that letter has been sent directly to every bishop in the country, and that's already postable. So this is just another document to add to that. But the evidence is really starting to mount. When you to get that many college professors to agree on anything is not an easy task, trust me. So that letter's a biggie. And mine will be in a very similar vein. So, yes, I can't tell you when I'm going to have to be able to, because I have to wait until Bishop does what he does with it. But yes, as soon as it's possible, we will add this to the growing list of documents we have that are designed to help make it very easy for Catholic clergy, particularly our bishops, to point out why we shouldn't be involved in this.
Excellent.
Can I jump in for 1 second, Tony? I'm sorry. I know that it's very difficult, and I hear from a lot of parents within Catholic schools, and so if they're on the line, I want to give them another resource to use, because a lot of times when you go into the school and you say, we don't like this, the Common Core is bad, it's not good for Catholic education, and they say they're just a set of standards. Can you read the standards for me, please, ma'am, and tell me what is anti-religious or anti-Catholic about them? There's certainly, they'll tell you there's nothing anti-religious about the Common Core standards. And there's a professor from Hillsdale. He's also the executive director of the Barney Charter Schools, which are all over the country. His name is Terrence Moore. And he just wrote a book, and it's called Story Killers, The Consequences of the Common Core. And it systematically goes through the standards and then relates them to Appendix A of the standards, Appendix B of the standards, the exemplar text that they recommend, the manner in which they are recommending that they be taught in. And it shows in his book a bias that is anti-religious. And so I think that if parents want something that they can read so that they can go in and say, these standards related to these exemplar texts promote anti-family, promote different ideas that are anti-religious and show them to your priest so that he can see that, I would recommend, I think it's on Amazon.com. I know it was released on Kindle, but the author is Terrence Moore, and the book is called Story Killers. And it basically goes through the ELA standards and shows how they're religiously biased.
Excellent.
And Tony,
yes.
I know we're going to go to the questions, but you sent me a link the other day, and I'm sorry I can't remember it. It's I believe it's a professor down in Florida who has online for free all the Common Core standards laid out, and he's gone through and annotated them. So for free, you can go to this link, and what you've got is every single sentence almost in Common Core, he has little bubbles where he's annotated all the problems with it, particularly for faith formation. That's a really good free resource as well. I just can't think of the name of the fella.
Dr. Guernsey?
Yep, it's Dr. Dan Guernsey. He's
Dr. Dan Guernsey.
Yep.
There you go.
Ave Maria in Florida, Ave Maria College in Ave Maria, Florida. He does have that side-by-side comparison. And if I find that, I will give that to Yvonne to post, just so
I've got it.
See that.
Yeah,
okay,
it's
posted
already.
Repost it maybe then. If you could repost that then after the call sometime tonight for people to look at. There's another great resource. So we've given you a book, we've given you some information, and this paper that Dr. Pesta is going to come out with, along with Dr. Guernsey's information on side-by-side comparison, along with some of the educational stuff that just went on with the group in New Jersey today and into this afternoon at 5 o'clock for all this. I'd like to go to just a quick minute or two closing statement from both Erin and Dr. Pesta, and then we'll go straight to Yvonne with some of the questions. First, let's go with Dr. Pesta.
Well, I think, we've said a lot, and I think the faster we get to the questions, the better. So I'll cede to Yvonne if she wants to make a statement, and we can get to the questions.
Yep. Erin, what about you?
Agreed.
Okay, go ahead, Yvonne.
Okay, so we have several questions that we received from members, and I'm going to go with the first one. Did Catholic schools research this curriculum and the accompanying books?
I'll start. No, they did not. When you say Catholic schools, now that's the question. I am convinced that the bishops did not. I mean, I have not seen any evidence to the contrary. And I don't think the administrators who made the decisions did either. I think that they panicked. I think that they decided that, the only thing that they actually believe that the only thing that keeps kids going to Catholic schools is the fact that Catholic school kids perform better on standardized tests than do public school kids. And what they saw when Common Core came out was that all the standardized tests were going to be switched to Common Core. And so in their tremendous terror, faithless terror, that, that's going to switch now. If the tests are Common Core, then our Catholic kids are going to go from superseding public school kids to falling behind them. We're going to lose money. We're going to lose students. Therefore, we have to completely cave into the public school system. That's what they did, it seems to me.
Erin, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree, because if they had done any good research or any adequate research, they would not have made the decision that they did. And I would ask them, to the parents out there, when you go into your office and you're complaining about Common Core, ask them, did you do any independent, analysis of the Common Core on your own, or did you just take the word of the state? And Erin, I'd like to see it. And then have them say, no, actually, we didn't. It's a way of proving your point.
That is absolutely right, Erin. And what you're going to hear from the administrators is we didn't have to do the research because Common Core Validation Committee did it themselves. They constantly, the same validation committee that the one English professor and the one math professor who were on the committee said don't do it. And so it's a complete circular game of blame everybody else.
And you know what I would ask them? Could you list for me the people who are on that validation committee? Guess what? They're not going to be able to list who they were. So you can say to them, so you are trusting a validation committee of which you don't even know who was on it. And have you read their minutes? You haven't? Well, that's surprising. So you're basically saying that you're entrusting my child's education to people that you don't even know who they are. And that video that will be available soon, I hope, through AmericanPrinciplesProject.org, Sandra Stotsky, the Common Core Validation Committee we're referring to for English Language Arts, she gives a whole synopsis of how that went down, and it is shocking.
Okay. Next question is we have, what would Jesus have to say about Common Core standards in our schools? How do you justify aligning the church and its schools to a program that has clearly defined parts that are anti-Catholic doctrine?
Go ahead.
I guess I would say I'm always very, very hesitant to presume to articulate what our Savior would say on a particular political issue. I mean, obviously Christ made it clear that he was bigger than politics, and he largely didn't concern himself with the particular politics of the day. That having been said, Christ makes it abundantly clear that the purpose of human life is to serve the Father with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. Catholic education has striven to do that for 2,000 years. This curriculum is as a 180 degrees opposed to that commandment as anything I have ever seen come down the pike. That, I say without hesitation, Christ would not have condoned.
Okay.
And I would just like to add, Jesus also says that every individual should reach their full human potential. Every human is different. If you're following a cookie-cutter, one-size-fits-all education policy, it does not allow the individual to reach their full potential. So that's what I would say.
Okay. What kind of data is being collected and shared in the Catholic schools? Because there's a lot of confusion here with the Catholic school parents, and particularly for New York. Not all the Catholic schools are going to be doing Park. Some do Terra Nova. So I don't know if you can shed any light on that.
Well, this is all still unfolding. One thing we know for certain is that regardless of Common Core, the really draconian data mining that takes place in Obamacare, which is already the law, requires all sorts of sensitive information to be gathered about your kids. There are places in Obamacare that actually mandate the schools to become information gathering tools in the name of health. So it's indeterminate yet. We know that our kids are going to be data mined. They're already being data mined in Catholic schools as well as private schools, as well as the public schools. That's going to continue. It has to continue because Obamacare, which is the law of the land, dictates it. It's legally mandated to happen. Common Core is going to make it much, 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 much more easy and more necessary and improve the avenues by which the federal government gets that information. But in perfect fairness, there's nothing particularly about Common Core that requires data mining. That's all stuff that comes from other big government programs. They just piggyback on the schools.
Mm.
Well, I would say that if you are doing Park or Smarter Balance, there are agreements in place between your state, all states who are in either consortium. There is a memorandum of understanding between the state and the U.S. Department of Education that they will make available all student data, student-level data. That means personally identifiable data available to the U.S. Department of Education for interoperability linking. So when your state education department says we aren't giving that information to the U.S. Department of Education, no, they're not giving it to them, but they are opening the door and saying it's available if you want to take it. Yep. What you learn with the Common Core is that it's all semantics and plays on words. No, they don't send it to them, but they say if you want it, here it is. It's all yours. So that is a lie. And when they tell you, well, yes, there is some information, but it's all supplied in the aggregate, meaning as a group. Well, they are increasing the number of data points that they must collect on each child. There are so many data points that information is very easily re-identified. So even they say, like, we de-identify the number, we take out your child's name. They have so much information on your child that once it's released, they can easily re-identify who that person is.
Just to let you know,
it's a very easy process.
But in the Catholic, go ahead, Tony, sorry.
There's 8 data points. If you give them the child, all you got to do is give them 8 data points, and they can reassemble who that person is with 85% accuracy. The databases that are out there that they're talking about now have 400 data points on them. They can put that aggregate data out all they want. They can scrub the name. Doesn't matter. They can track that right back to the child very quickly.
And I would like to go back to the accreditation thing. I know it's like my new big kick, but that advanced ed accreditation process that the Catholic schools are doing, and I don't know specifically each state, but it seems to be the trend going on across the country. They require a lot of data collection on the students, and that accreditation body will have that information. And we don't know what kind of agreements they have with other groups about sharing it. So I would I would almost insist that parents who are concerned ask their Office of Education, what is their accreditation process, who are they accredited by, and what are the requirements of that accreditation, and ask to see the report. Because each school district, which, most places consider like the Archdiocese a school district, ask them to see the report that they gave to be accredited to advanced ed. And I think you will find a lot of information in there that is shocking. And secondly, if you look at advanced ed accreditation reports and their standards and their benchmarks, they are almost identical to the Common Core Catholic Identity Initiative standards and benchmarks. It's frightening. I mean, it's almost as if advanced ed helped write the CCCII or CIS. I think they are really in charge of what we're doing.
Okay, next question. So with the recent events that were just discovered today with the NCEA receiving $100 million from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, what is your view on this, and how is it going to affect the diocese throughout the country?
I don't think it was $100 million.
I'm sorry, 100,000. Excuse me,
yeah.
my typo.
Yeah,
I guess I would
isn't
say
going to buy you much.
It's not. But it's a symbolic thing, isn't it? It's a symbolic thing. And the fact is what we tried to say at the beginning, that what you're doing here is you are now soliciting as your authority. You are now going for a financial handout to the people who have made it their express purpose to undermine, if not eliminate, Catholic education altogether. And that link, and nobody, I don't think anybody's surprised. If you are surprised that the group did that, then you haven't been paying attention. So what does this mean in the long run? I think it's a gotcha moment. I think we now can honestly say, when people throw that group in our face, because it's already happened to me, that, well, what about the group here? This Catholic Education Association, they support this. Now you point it out to them, right? Now you can say, but this is why they did it. And so I think it's a gotcha moment. It's one more way we can begin to continue to discredit them. What do you think about it, Erin?
I mean, I think it's only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the NCEA has relationships with many different organizations that have taken a lot of money from Bill Gates, and the people involved in the NEA are also involved in all these different, groups, like the Broader, Bolder Approach to Education, which is a group that is trying to formulate more assessments for Catholic schools. I think there are things as something like, we need better assessments in all areas, including student work habits, mental health, citizenship habits. What are appropriate behaviors to enable, students to achieve success in a pluralistic society, which I found to be somewhat questionable. We're needing assessments that are going to be able to assess the whole child. And while I'm into a whole child, meaning one that's well-rounded and is exposed to music and art and philosophy and math and English, and not just math and English, but all those nice things, the whole child, when they talk about it, is more than that. It's about their character, their physical health, their civic and social development. Those are a parent's right. Those are a parent's right to form, not a school. So how are we going to have assessments on that? And that kind of goes back to the data thing. So there's all this money coming in from so many places. That $100,000, is simply a drop in the bucket, if it's even that. There's so much money going in through all these sub-channels to influence what's happening in our Catholic schools that I think people need to be aware of.
Okay. So here's a question regarding tuition. We as parents are paying tuition for the classical and different Catholic education we want for our children. We don't want Common CCCII, Common Core State Standards Catholic Identity Initiative. Teachers, for the most part, don't want them. Principals do not want it. Why are we forced to accept this when no one ever asked us our opinion? No one knew Common Core was in our schools. We are essentially paying for a public school education twice through school taxes and tuition. Isn't forcing something upon someone that they do not want bullying? For example, something the New York Archdiocese of New York just implemented a new program for students, ironically, about bullying, and yet they practice it. So I guess it was more of a rhetorical.
Yeah, I guess I would say that I make this point when I give this talk. When it comes to bullying, I would rather have my kids' lunch money stolen every day on the campus green than to have the full force of the federal government come down in this way. The business about the what are we paying for? The fact is, and I think this needs to be said, that for far too long, even Catholic parents of kids in Catholic schools have been quiet, while slowly, over the last 20, 30 years, Catholic schools have become increasingly indistinguishable from public school. This is not just a Common Core issue. Common Core is the big final push, but it's been happening. And I think what has to happen is the moms and dads who are paying for this education, the ones who want a return to genuine Catholic faith formation and classical Christian education, they have to be willing to vote with their feet. There is no reason on earth to pay that money for a curriculum that is basically just a public school curriculum. So, I mean, if that means you're going to have to pull your kids out and homeschool, if that means you're going to have to find some school that doesn't do it, unless parents are willing to do that, if they just keep acceding to the creep of secularism in our schools, keep paying the money, keep sending their kids, then it's just a matter of time before Catholic education as we know it's dead anyway.
And you know what? If you really want a good opinion, find a mom who has kids who are like 17, 13, 9, 8, and 6. Because I think they're such a good resource because they had a child that went through that grade, you know, several years ago, maybe a decade ago. And they have that relevant position to see what their child in third grade is getting now versus their child who is now 17, 18 years old, what education they received in that same grade. And they will tell you it is a dumbed-down education. So you're right. I mean, it's been a slow creep, and those are the people who can actually say honestly what the differences are between Catholic education today and Catholic education 10 or more years ago. I think they're a resource.
And it's not just dumbed down, it subverts Catholic values. And when I say that parents have to be prepared to leave, that's not, I'm not saying that we should abandon the schools. What I'm saying is, unless there is some teeth to our demands, they're not going to take you seriously. If you keep putting your kids in that school and paying that money, why should they change it? Why should they give it up? They've done it for years now. They've secularized the schools. Nobody complained then, and they're banking on the fact that after the first couple of semesters go by, you're going to forget about it too.
Yeah, and you know what I would also suggest? Go find the 5 biggest donors of your parish because they, unfortunately, their voices have a lot more influence. You find the 5 biggest donors in your parish. Here's a game plan for anyone looking for one. Find the 5 biggest donors, explain to them what the Common Core is, and have them go in and advocate on your part. It is powerful.
Okay. There was a question that was raised today by a mother from Catholic school here in New York. This is new to me, and I honestly have never heard of it, but she said her Catholic school was given money through Race to the Top. As far as I know, and I'm no expert in this, but the Race to the Top competitive grant program, wasn't that just for public school education?
I'm not sure. They have a, we had the state level Race to the Top. That's the first one that went on there. Race to the Top 1, Race to the Top 2, Race to the Top 3. That was all statewide. And then, in order to subvert any, like if your state didn't win or didn't comply with the, federal education agenda, what they did is they went to individual districts and they said, if you want to apply for Race to the Top, you can do so individually as a district. And so districts are able to say, yes, we will do Common Core. Yes, we will take your assessments. Yes, we will do your data collection. Yes, we will do everything that you want. And they will be able to win that grant and get that money. It might be possible. I'm not sure, but I mean, a lot of Catholic archdioceses are considered school districts, and I'm sure that they would probably be able to apply. I'm not sure about that, but that. So,
are you referring to the race to the top D? Because I know that's another phase to race to the top D for districts. Because I know my school district itself actually bypassed New York State, and I said, and went directly to the federal government for this certain competitive grant program. So are you referring to the race to the top D?
Yes. That's
okay. That's what it is.
And
that's exactly what it is.
Usurping a state's life. I mean, that is ridiculous. I mean, you live in one district, and you are no longer responsible to the state. Now you're responsible to the federal government.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a total violation of federal law.
And you know the federal government is absolutely licking its chops to give money to Catholic schools that are going to go Common Core.
Oh.
Absolutely, and so that's part of this too. It's not just a matter of our administrators selling out because they're terrified of losing the perceived superiority of the Catholic schools through nationalized testing. It's money, and it's not just money from things like Race to the Top. There are all sorts of federal grant programs that have crept up that are offering all sorts of technology assistance to Catholic schools if they implement Common Core. So there's this huge promise that Catholic schools, the technology requirements of this kind of testing are hugely expensive. So people like Bill and Melinda Gates, they're fronting all of this grant money for any private or Catholic school to be able to ratchet up their technology, to be able to do the kind of testing that Common Core requires. And Catholic schools are going for it as quickly as they can. They're trying to gobble up that money.
Yeah.
And just about that, just really quick, is that these groups, they're not, I mean, the Obama administration, why in the world would they throw their arms open wide to giving money to religious schools? I mean, like Dr. Pesta said about what Obama said in Ireland. You know, the reason you guys don't get along is because you're in the Catholic school and you're in the Protestant school, and it won't work like that. They don't promote religious schools. So why do they give them money? It's because they want them under the tent so that they can control them. This is an issue of control. This is not an issue of a helping hand in any means.
Absolutely. So here's another question, I guess, would go under the last question. My principal implied that Catholic schools have no choice but to accept funding from the government. Is this true? Will Catholic schools adopt failing methods just because of the money?
I think it's a vicious circle. As Catholic schools stop being Catholic, kids drop out. You know, almost every diocese in the country is closing Catholic schools because there aren't enough kids. And so it's a vicious circle because why are they losing students? They're losing students precisely because they have no real Catholic values anymore. And moms and dads have figured out that Catholic schools that, as you said earlier, Erin, the Catholic schools that aren't Catholic, why pay for them? And so in order to compensate for losing these Catholic students, what happens? You go to the federal government. That's where the voucher program comes from. You go to the federal government. You get the federal government to subsidize Catholic education, which makes it less Catholic, which chases more Catholic families away, and around we go.
Okay. Common Core state standards we have for the public schools, and then we have Common Core Catholic Identity Initiative. What is the distinct difference? I mean, how I describe Common Core Catholic Identity Initiative is basically just Common Core state standards with a crucifix on top. But can you point out any distinct differences between the two standards?
I mean, they are extremely similar in almost every single way. They jazz up the language. Like I said, most of it within Common Core, it's all about semantics. They just change things to, infuse a Catholic identity into something that is not Catholic. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't do that. You can't take two ideas who are completely antithetical to each other and then fuse one into the other. If you do that, one gets lost. And I'm telling you, the Common Core has the hammer. It's not getting lost. It's the Catholic ideas that will be lost in that endeavor. It's simply, and if you look at who's behind it, Lorraine Ozar, Sister McDonald, I mean, look them up. They are people who support many of the ideas that we are against. They support progressive education. They support many, many ideas that a practicing Catholic would abhor.
Okay.
And I feel badly saying that someone who is a nun, but it's the truth.
So we have another question. Why are Catholic school administrators shutting down the opposition by trying to convince us parents that this is the best method to teach our children when we do not believe it ourselves?
I think it's because they're in bed with the devil. They know it. On some level, they know they've sold their souls, and there's no justification for it. When we have confronted the Catholic school administrations in Wisconsin about this, they dig, as your question says, they dig their heels in, because what's the alternative? The only alternative is to concede how crass, materialistic, and contrary to the mission of Catholic education their behavior has been. And that's the problem. That they have no, in the same way that take one more metaphor from Obamacare. Everybody sees how bad it is. Everybody sees how dysfunctional it is. But the people who are for it are so convinced they can't go back now. They dig their heels in, because to go back is to see the complete failure of the initial idea. That's what's happening in our Catholic schools. The administrators have bought this hook, line, and sinker. They've bought it out of fear and the hope of material gain. And when you point it out to them, all they can do is deny it, because to admit it means that they have to be removed from their positions, that they have betrayed Catholic faith, Catholic ideals, and Catholic education. That's where, a lot of our bishops have a problem. And I know the Bishop of Green Bay is struggling with this, because if we're right, and clearly we're right, that means the people who've done this have to go. And these are serious decisions.
And I say good riddance to bad rubbish. I mean, that's so true, and that is the same story both within the Catholic Church and also at the state level. You have a few good legislators who say, "Gosh, I supported that," or maybe not really legislators because they weren't involved, but state board of ed members or people who may have sat on an educational roundtable that recommended the Common Core in the first place. You have a few really good leaders that will sit there, listen to us, and they'll say, "You know what, I didn't have all this information. I wasn't fed this information. I was fed a completely different story. I believe what you're saying. You're very well researched, and therefore I'm going to change my decision and I'm going to come out against this." That's a leader. And when you talk to your politicians or you talk to your school administrators or whoever it is and say, "We will support you. We will give you an out." Because, to be honest, they probably didn't understand that it was much different than their past state standards. I mean, they really could possibly have an excuse for doing it back in the beginning. So you need to give people an out and say, "Look, we realize you didn't have the information. We understand that. But at this point, we want to respect you as a leader. We want you to be a leader, and we want you to take us out of this mess." And I think that is something that people respond to better than, "You made a bad decision."
Okay. We have a lot of questions about the state assessment. Erin, I don't know if you can answer them within your own state, since you speak to a lot of the Catholic school parents within your own state. But here's a question. Can a student in a Catholic school refuse state assessments? This particular mother was told by her regional superintendent that if my child does this, she can quote unquote, find another school, meaning she will be kicked out. Why are my parental rights to protect my child being threatened?
I can tell you in Wisconsin, Yvonne, that we had a showdown just like this. All the various MAPS tests, not even the Common Core tests yet, which haven't really been finalized. We're talking about the basic MAPS tests. A lot of our Catholic moms and dads in the diocese absolutely don't want their kids to take it. The president of a local Catholic high school, the principal, I should say, of a local Catholic high school, wrote them all nasty letters saying, "Your kids will be at these tests or else." The parents wrote back and said, "We are not subjecting our kids to the test." The principal wrote back a little bit softer and said, "I need you to come in and talk to me about this. We have to talk about this." They said, "We are not sending our kids to the test." And the principal said, "Well, I can't control that. There's no mechanism that I have to make you take them." And they relented. So any Catholic school that tells you, if you don't take our tests, you're out of here, That I would go over their heads so fast. I can't imagine there's a single bishop in the country. I can't imagine it. I mean, and I would hate to think there is, that would side with a principal who said, if either you do what we tell you or you go away, and when it comes to those tests, because these are Catholic schools. We've got public school kids opting out of the tests, and the public schools can't do anything to them. We had that one school, it was in the news a couple days ago, remember? That one public school where 80 mothers refused, it was a small one, 80 mothers refused to let their kids take the test, and so they just canceled the test. They can't make you take anything. And if that's the public schools, then you know there's no reason that why your kids must take those tests in the Catholic schools.
Well, the reason they want them to take the test is because if they don't have a certain number of kids take the test, it will make the school look bad. It has nothing to do with your child, their education, their future endeavors. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, at the high school level, that might be different if things go through the way that they're planned, because end-of-course assessments in high school can determine certain things for college. But at the grade school level, K through 8, I mean, it means nothing. Your children's scores on those tests mean nothing. And, I would say there's a double-edged sword, Catholic schools. You want to take state money, you want to, follow state things, then guess what? You have to follow the state policies in some respects. And you are going to be held to the same type of legal things that the public schools are held to, meaning if parents don't want to take a test, they can say no. Back in the day, before they took federal money, before they were in with the vouchers and so forth, you might have been able to say, we're going to kick you out if you don't do this test. But they're slowly they're slowly being kind of usurped into the state body, and slowly they're going to have to start abiding by state laws, like allowing people to opt out of things and losing control over their schools.
Well, and think about it, too. The reason the administrators are so adamant, it has nothing to do with any legality or law or even any Catholic school rule. The reason the administrators are so adamant that the kids will take the test is because they need the kids to take the test to validate their decision to get in bed with the federal government anyway. If you have to show, if the government's paying you and giving you money and you're getting these grants, the government expects something. The government expects that your kids, if we're giving you these funds, your kids will conform to what the public school kids conform to. And so it's a matter of saving face for the administrators. We've taken the money. Now we have to get moms and dads to do this, or else we've taken it in bad faith. And the smart moms and dads are the ones who say, we will not validate your bad decisions. And every time the Catholic mom and dad does that, they win. They can do nothing to them.
No.
Okay.
And I would that's the sort of law.
Math question. So, again, Catholic school. There's a Catholic school in New York, in upstate New York, and the big push now is math. In my child's school, social studies and history is now in the back burner, barely being taught. It's just constantly math, Common Core math in this Catholic school. Why is this deemed unnecessary now, meaning the social studies and history? Why is it on the back burner, and why is math the...
Well, for one reason, they haven't really released the social studies and history Common Core curriculum. The school's gone Common Core. We don't have a Common Core social studies and history curriculum yet that they can implement. So you see how insidious this is. So what they've decided, how far in is this school? Much farther in than any public school I can think of. And what their attitude basically is, it sounds like to me, is until we get those standards, we won't use them. What we have is math and English, and kids are struggling mightily with math, Common Core math. We'll just focus on those standards because they can't test kids nationally on standards that haven't been taught yet. What we do know is math and English standards are testable. The tests are coming. So they're going to drill their kids, not so that they know math, but so they can pass the math Common Core test when it comes in.
Yeah, it's just teaching to the test. That's what gets tested is what gets taught. And that used to be the case for public schools, and now it's the case for Catholic schools. And I just want to touch on the math for 1 second, because I know a lot of parents whose kids are in like K through 3. It's just ridiculous. I mean, the types of math problems they want them to do, it's not that they're hard, meaning the meat of the arithmetic is very simple, but the way they want them to answer the question requires a lot of abstract thinking and analysis that even a child of a very high IQ would not be able to answer because they have not internally developed mentally the processes of abstract thinking. And there is
cortex.
Yes, exactly. And there's a speaker at Notre Dame, and it's on YouTube. Her name is Dr. Megan Koschnick. It's Koschnick. And she gave one of the most incredible speeches about childhood development and how the Common Core is inappropriate. They are developmentally inappropriate for grades K through 3. And any parent out there who's struggling with it and it's like, my gosh, my kid can't do this. I mean, what's wrong with him? I mean, because you do start to doubt your own child. It's a sad thing. But when you think, well, this is what the school's doing, why can't he understand that, you can't add these numbers like this and you have to break them apart and then you have to justify why and how, and my kid can't do that. And a lot of parents think there's something wrong with their kid. There's nothing wrong with your kid. There's something wrong with what they're asking them to do. And I would just say to watch that video, take that video into your K through 3 teachers and say, what is your response to this? Because this is ridiculous. And it's a very, very good document or video, and I hope everyone can get a chance to look at it.
It's a fantastic video. We have actually up on our website in the video section, so the members can look at that. We have here a question, what can we do to get it out of our Catholic schools here in New York and nationwide? I think, parents who send their children to Catholic school here and nationwide have more of a chance than public schools because we pay a tuition. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's like I said earlier. I think there has to be teeth in the threat. We've seen that our Catholic schools administrators have actually seen it. They've adopted the federal government, the federal Common Core people are actually sending out a detailed plan to Catholic school administrators about how to handle angry parents. And among the things that they're told is, don't ever talk to them in groups. Bring them in one by one, or a mom and a dad, that's it. So this is an elaborate protocol. And so I think what has to happen is that you have to have teeth. You have to be willing to pull your kids out. Because what they're worried about, if they're taking Common Core because they want to be perceived as having a better education in the public schools, and they want money. Those are the two things that we've said that are the main objectives here. Then having half your kids walk out, having 4 dozen moms and dads in a school of 200 say, we'll take your kids out of classes and demand it, then they're working at cross purposes. And the very reason they took Common Core has now been undermined. But if they can buy you off, if they can give you the same old reassurances, bring you in one by one, and make you feel like you're crazy because they separate you from everybody else who feels like you do. And so you quietly keep sending your kids, you grumble about it privately, but you keep paying the tuition. That's the strategy. They want to wear you down. You've got to keep united. You've got to keep building support. If you got a Catholic school with 300 kids and only 25 moms are concerned, those 25 moms got to get 25 more moms on board. But to reach critical mass, they'll have to accede to you. You're going to have to force the issue that way. But the days of being able to simply be angry and go and vent and then expect something to change, those days are over. These administrators have invested their entire careers in implementing Common Core. It's going to take something extraordinary to get them to turn back.
Okay.
I mean, it's interesting because there was I have 2 children. One is in 8th grade this year. One is in 5th grade. And last year was kind of like was a bad year of Common Core. The curriculum was bad. It's cooperative learning. I mean, my daughter in 8th grade is in Algebra 1 because, she's already on that track. Kids eventually will not be getting Algebra 1 in 8th grade because it's not part of the Common Core. That will be in 9th grade, which is a huge travesty. But they're doing cooperative learning now. So my daughter, in their classroom, the teacher writes the problems on the board, and then they're supposed to get in groups, and they're supposed to try and figure out the problems. No instruction, no direct instruction from the teacher. He walks around. He's no longer the sage on the stage, is what they say. He's a guide on the side. I mean, how long is it going to take to get through the Algebra 1 book? They'll never be ready for end-of-course assessments. So it will implode on its own, where the parents who aren't on board with you now eventually, it takes a little bleeding to get people to act. But they did a whole but they did a presentation where they hired this person to come in and talk about the Common Core. And they said in the email out to parents, you may not bring anybody with you that is not a parent of a St. Thomas student. No outsiders. I mean, that's ridiculous. And it was held in the church. And I wrote back, how many forums held in our church are closed to the public? I mean, that's outrageous. I mean, the church is an open place, open to all. A grandparent, a donor of the school can't come and listen to that. It's because they try to control the information. There is a real movement. And that's why I go back to my original argument about the priest and the bishop and who's in control. Because to me, that seems like a complete violation of what the Catholic Church stands for.
Let's wrap up here now, because you've been on for an hour and 45 minutes. If you could each do some kind of closing statement, maybe say something about some of the websites again that you guys were talking about. I would also like to let everybody know that if you Google Education Data Palooza October 2012, a year ago, you will see at the White House they had a whole forum there on how to cut up this data on these kids. To say it's not federal is beyond belief. So when you see something like that, you might want to refer them over to the website. It's actually on the Department of Education's website. Why don't we start first, closing statement with, and then some websites, et cetera, from Yvonne.
Okay. Well, thank you, Erin, so much for joining in last minute. We really appreciate it. Emmett McGowarty had some flight delays, so he was not able to make it with us. Thank you, Dr. Pesta, for taking the time to inform parents, not only New York, but nationwide. I know we had parents on from Ohio and different states, and Connecticut as well. And thank you, Tony, for moderating as always. You always do a very nice job. Our website here in New York is Stop Common Core in New York, spelled out STOP, Common Core in NEWYORK.com. We have many resources up there, from template letters that you can send to your administrators, your legislators, even Catholic school letters that you can send to Superintendent McNiff, who is the superintendent for New York Archdiocese, Cardinal Dolan as well, videos. It's a source of information. We try to make it as accessible as possible. And if anyone has any requests to put up on the website, we take them. You can email me at Yvonne Y. Gasparino at outlook.com. So that's me.
Okay. And over to Erin.
Yes, we have a website. It's Indiana specific. It's Hoosiers Against Common Core. I would also like to say that the Truth in American Education is a great website. They have information from all states. If you're in Ohio or you're in California or wherever it is that you are, they will have links to groups in your state. So you can get on that site and find out who you can work with within your state against the Common Core. And then for the Catholics, there is a new website, and I'm just trying to pull it up, and my computer's being slow because I wanted to get it exact. There is a thing, it's called Catholics for a Classical Education, which is that very specific information about Common Core, Catholic schools, and what it is, and it's called Catholics for a Classical Education. There's a website. There is also a Facebook page that people can research to kind of find out different things about, the Catholic Church and Common Core, and what are some alternatives. I mean, a classic education is very distinguishably different from the Common Core education. And I think that's what most parents think they're going to get when they enroll their child in a Catholic school. And it's a way of convincing parents to maybe do something to try and stop the Common Core.
And could you also say something about the APP site and the Notre Dame event?
Okay, yeah. So the American Principles Project.org is basically the parent type company of Truth in American Education, and they will have available the videos from the Common Core Conference, which was held at the University of Notre Dame on September 9th, and it will have videos of all of the individual speakers, and I think it is an excellent resource for somebody who wants to learn about the Common Core from people who were actually involved with the process. Sandra Stotsky, Professor Emeritus James Milgram, Stanford University for the Mathematics, Zev Warman, Jamie Gass from the Pioneer Institute, Joy Pullman from Education Reform News, Heartland Institute. Just a wealth of knowledge, and that should be available on their website. I don't think it is currently, but it should be within the next 1 or 2 days. I think they're just tuning that video so that it's easily accessible.
I had just have. Go ahead. Sorry.
Duke.
Oh, yeah. I want to thank you all for letting me be here tonight. The one site I would take you to is if you want more information of the stuff that we've talked about, go to our site at Freedom Project Education, FPE, Frank Paul Edward, FPEUSA.org. All sorts of Common Core resources, all free, lots of slides, lots of information. You can download it, you can print it, you can forward it to people. It doesn't cost you anything. The other thing I would say is one of the things that we found to be very, very, very meaningful, and we do it here at FPE, I do a lot of it, if wherever you are, Connecticut, Ohio, New York, wherever you are, if you've got a group of people who need a talk, you got a bunch of moms, some of whom don't know, or moms and dads who are skeptical, but they think it's bad or good, you can get some people together. We'll come and do a talk for you. The one we did in Albany was very successful, had about 1,000 people. It really is a shocking talk when people who don't know what Common Core is are taught what it is. So we're welcome to come. If you need us to come, contact us. We can come out there and give a talk for you. And that shakes people up, gets them talking, and that's it's a much more different dynamic than showing them videos or taking them to websites, because when you've got somebody there to answer their questions in real time, when you've got somebody there to take them through slides and videos and show them what it is, it's a meaningful way of outreach. It really does impact a lot. So we're always willing to do that as well.
Now, Duke, how do you get a hold of you to have you come to one of those events?
You can get a hold of me at speusa.org. In fact, I can give you my email address directly. It's Pesta J. P as in Paul, E as in Edward, S as in Sam, T as in Tom, A as in Alan, J as in Joseph, at speusa.org. So if you're interested in a talk, we do not charge speaker fees. We don't try to make money off this. So if you're interested in a talk, you can get a hold of me, and we'll see if we can arrange it.
And Tony,
I finally have it in front of me, just to be clear with people. The new website for Catholics for classical education, which has all kinds of money about Common Core standards and its impact on Catholic schools. It is Catholics for FOR Classical Ed, CATHOLICS FOR CLASSICALED.com. And it is a wonderful site with a lot of pertinent information for that. And if people have questions about anything I've talked about tonight, I give out my cell number because I know what it's like to be a parent and just need to get questions answered. I can be reached at 317-340-1357.
Excellent. And then, Yvonne.
I just want to make one point. We have a Facebook group page, Stop Common Core in New York Catholic Schools. I already put up the link for Catholics for Classical Education.com if anyone is on right now. And we're looking for more members. We're looking to stir up the Catholic schools within New York State. So we have 119 members. The Stop Common Core in New York State, we're closing in hopefully on 6,000 members very shortly. So we're looking for moms and dads who are dedicated, who want to get this done and out of our schools, in the Catholic schools and also in the public schools, everywhere, quite honestly.
That's the truth.
Yes.
Anymore.
Thanks everyone for the call. We'll end it right here. This has been recorded, and it will be up on the site in a few days on the New York site. So if you want to refer back to it. A couple hours, we held everybody almost all the way through. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.